It's 7:05, and we're going to call to order this meeting of the Regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority of Richfield. It's January 21st, and the first item of business is consideration of the election of officers and the designation of Assistant to the Secretary for the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority for 2020.
Is this where I make a motion? Okay, so I would move a slate of officers to be Mary Supple as president, chair of the HRA, Pat Elliott as vice chair, and Maria Reagan-Gonzalez as secretary.
Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? You have to ask 3 times. Hearing none, we'll close nominations. Is there any discussion? All right. In addition to those officers, do you want to designate the Community Development Administrative Assistant to be Latanya Dubois as the Assistant to the Secretary?
Yes, I would add that.
All right. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of having Mary Supple be chair, Pat Elliott vice chair, Maria Reagan-Gonzalez be secretary, and Latanya Dubois be the assistant to the secretary? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've passed that motion. Next, we have approval of the minutes of the regular HRA meeting of December 16th, 2019.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next is approval of the agenda.
So second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the agenda. We're going to now go to the consent calendar. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. Tonight's consent calendar contains 3 separate items which, if acted upon by the HRA in one motion, would be approved in their entirety and no further HRA action would be required. However, any HRA commissioner may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar, placed on the regular agenda for regular discussion. Tonight we have, as I said, 3 items. Consideration of the adoption of a resolution amending the bylaws of the Richfield HRA to revise the order of business, including the addition of an open forum section. Number 2, consideration of resolutions designating official depositories for the HRA for 2020, including the approval of collateral. And finally, the designation of Community Development Director John Stark as the Executive Director of the Richfield HRA for 2020. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? One thing I wanted to point out is that the open forum rules would be similar to what happens at council meetings, so people could speak to any item that's not currently on the agenda for 3 minutes. And normally this would come earlier in the meeting, but after the consent calendar, if without objection, if anybody would like to speak in the open forum, we'd like to open it up. Is there any objection to that? All right, are there any other comments or discussion? I just also want to thank Executive Director Stark for his service. Appreciate it. All right, all in favor of approving the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the consent calendar. At this point, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for open forum? Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak? All right, just keep in mind for future meetings, you're welcome to speak, and it just has to be something that's not on the current agenda. Thank you. All right, moving on. We're going to item 4, which is consideration of a resolution approving a preliminary development agreement with North Bay for the development of the Henley II redevelopment project. Mr. Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. On November 26th of 2019, the development firm North Bay presented a redevelopment concept for properties located at 6345 Lindale Avenue South, 520/22, 600-02, and 608/10, 64th Street, to a joint work session of the Richfield City Council, HRA, and Planning Commission. That proposal included the planned rehabilitation of the existing 22-unit apartment building at 6345 Lindale Avenue South and the construction of a new 5-story, 90-unit building on the remainder of the property. The area in which the new building and its associated parking is proposed is currently occupied by 3 duplexes and a single-family home. Due to the high cost of land assembly, structured parking, and other subsurface construction costs, the developer has determined that they would almost certainly require some degree of public financial assistance to make the project feasible. The most appropriate public funding identified by staff would be a housing tax increment financing or TIF district. A housing TIF district would require that either 20% of the units be affordable to households earning 50% of the area median income or below, or 40% of the units to be affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income. All 3 public bodies at the work session had a generally positive reaction to North Bay's proposal. Staff indicated that the next steps would be to bring a preliminary development agreement to the HRA for their consideration. That agreement, which was prepared by legal counsel Julie Eddington, is attached for consideration. Some important aspects of the agreement include the developer will investigate the feasibility of rehabbing the existing 22-unit apartment building. So I'll just stop there and say that's something we're all excited about.
Yeah.
It's not a foregone conclusion that they will be able to. We're all hopeful. I've talked with our housing inspectors, and they felt like in years past that was not a well-maintained building. The past few years, the maintenance has improved, but they had some concerns about the building. But as I said, we're all hopeful. The developer will seek city approvals for the construction of a new 90-unit building. The developer will conform with Richfield's inclusionary housing policy, or in the case of a TIF district, will exceed that policy. And the developer will provide an enhanced access to Garfield Park from 64th Street. As I stated, the agreement itself is attached, and we also sent out late last week some updated project renderings and plans so you can see what the developer has in mind, and representatives of the developer are here to answer any questions you might have. So with that, I would stand for any questions you might have of me. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I did want to comment that I was glad to see that there's going to be a way to reach that park, because that was just rehabbed by our new equipment was put in by the recreation department, and it's kind of this hidden gem that I don't think many people know are there. So if we get more access to the neighborhood, to that park as part of this, that's great.
Can you do the simple math for me of the existing units, what we're losing and what we would be gaining in affordability? Like, just coming out of the conversation, what is the 1-for-1 if we can't rehab the existing 22-unit building and just doing the 40% of the units to be affordable to the 60% AMI? Like,
Well, first of all, I would say that under the housing TIF district, I'd mentioned the 2 options, the 20% at 50 or the 40% at 60. Every developer I've talked to about those 2 choices has found that the 20% at 50 works better for them. And, depending on how you feel, the deeper affordability is something staff has been more supportive of. And so I think that would be the more likely scenario. So again, if they weren't able to rehab the existing 22 units, 90 units would require 18 affordable units for households earning 50% of the area median income or less.
So as a follow-up to that, I know the idea is to try and rehabilitate that existing housing. If they find out that's not feasible, would they then change the plan to include more affordable units somewhere?
They would have to. Either they would have to both meet the inclusionary housing policy and to meet the requirements of a housing TIF district. I believe. I haven't looked into the legalities of it, but that's my belief. I should note as well that they are proposing a ground level, highly accessible unit in the new building.
Just one.
Yeah.
They're requiring, or they're proposing to build all of the ADA required units in the building, and I don't remember what that count comes to. Yeah, so it's a 2% requirement under ADA. The ADA has, Americans with Disabilities Act has some thresholds. The one unit that they're talking about would exceed any of the thresholds in what it provides in terms of features.
Are there additional questions?
Do you know if they're looking for additional sources of funding to help with the affordability at all?
I do not know beyond TIF. In conversations we've had with them, I know we've discussed seeking grant funding. A lot of the grant funding is highly tied to the calendar and when applications are due. And so I think that would have a big impact on whether they're going to be seeking other sources of funding. But again, they're here and they could address that as well.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Says of buying the 22-unit building?
They already own it.
They own it, okay.
Yes.
And there's some question that they wouldn't do anything to it? They would just leave it as is?
No, I think that their intention is to do it. Out of an abundance of caution, I'm just trying to temper that expectation a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or discussion? All right.
I'm sorry, I had one other question.
Okay, go ahead.
All of these units are, or not all of them, but many of them, most of them are studios, very small space. And my question for the developer or for whoever has some information is, what is the attractiveness to people of those? Will they have any problems filling them all, I guess is my question.
Well, Commissioner Sandel and Madam Chair, first I would say my understanding is they're hoping to have as little displacement as possible, that the existing tenants would be able to remain. You know, there is some natural vacancy that always occurs, and so that would be rehabbing units as they become vacant. And then when those happen, you can kind of move people around in the building. So part of it is that they are hoping to retain the existing residents as opposed to attracting new. Secondly, I can tell you that the Henley I apartments that are being built at the Lindale Gardens site, there are smaller units in terms of the square footage, and they've had a very positive market response to that.
Okay.
And I think that positive market response was what led them to look at this building and doing more work here.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that came up at the work session is because the transit is so good there, there's a lot of people
We don't need cars.
that would
yeah.
like to live there.
Okay, great.
All right, we need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve a resolution granting approval to the preliminary development agreement with North Bay. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we've approved the resolution. Our next item of business is consideration of a resolution approving a preliminary development agreement with Penn Investments LLC for the development of 6501 Penn Avenue South and 6504 Oliver Avenue South. Mr. Stark?
Thank you, Chair Supple. I'm going to ask Housing and Redevelopment Manager Julie Urban to provide the staff report.
Chair Supple, members of the HRA, at work sessions on September 16th and November 26th, The Housing and Redevelopment Authority reviewed development concepts for the HRA-owned property at 6501 Penn Avenue South from 2 different development teams. Based on feedback provided at those work sessions, staff began work on a preliminary redevelopment agreement with the development team of NHH Properties, Boyclair Corporation, and Locus Architects, doing business as Penn Investments LLC. That agreement is attached to your staff report for consideration. The developer is planning to explore a redevelopment concept for the property that includes the construction of a building with anywhere between 40 and 100 market rate and affordable housing units and up to 12,000 square feet of commercial space. Some important aspects of the agreement include the developer will provide preliminary plans and sketch plan review and will seek neighborhood feedback. The developer will explore applying for grants and potentially tax credits, and the HRA will agree to cooperate with those applications. The developer will comply with the city's inclusionary housing policy. However, based on work session discussions, the developer is exploring funding options to provide deeper affordability as well as more accessible units. Due to the high cost of land assembly, structured parking, affordable housing, and other subsurface construction costs, the developer has determined that they would likely require some degree of public financial assistance to make the project feasible. A redevelopment or a housing tax increment financing district are both possible tools that will be explored. The developer will explore future phases of the project that could include adjacent properties, and the HRA will provide a right of entry to the property for the developer to access the property for survey, geotechnical, and marketing purposes. And finally, the agreement also encompasses the HRA-owned property at 6500 Oliver Avenue South. This is a remnant parcel from a previous county road project that we've owned for many years. The developer now owns the adjacent single-family residential property at 6504 Oliver Avenue South. So they would like to explore what might be done now that they own, or we own one and they own the other parcel. So there might be an option to do some things slightly differently from what had been proposed before with that. And then they also are obviously exploring the acquisition of other adjacent properties to see where we're at. And so that'll all be a part of the process that we undertake in the next few months. So the agreement is effective through July 31st of this year, but we do set an interim deadline of April 30th for some of the steps, including sketch plan review, some financial analysis, and neighborhood meeting. The deadlines are based in part on funding deadlines for the various outside funding sources that we'd like to explore. And finally, the agreement calls for the developer to reimburse the HRA for some staff costs and administrative costs, primarily our legal and financial consultants, in order to meet the terms of the agreement. If you have any questions, I'm available for those. Otherwise, there are representatives from the development team in the audience.
Are there questions?
6504, is that the one right next to the remnant? Okay.
Yes,
Thank
yep,
you.
exactly. So that opens up some possibilities that we at least want to take a look.
I was just wondering if you could give some more context. You know, I believe, left feedback cards or cards of some sort between the two. Why did you guys move forward with this one? Based off those feedback, I'm assuming it's based off those feedback cards, but if you could talk more about that.
From what we heard, in terms of, there was a variety of items that you looked at, and then the preferences were for this team, and I think it was maybe 8 of the different categories, and the other team was just in a couple of those. I think that there was, while not a complete consensus, and we're still not entirely clear based on the conversation we just had with, the details of that deeper affordability. Several people spoke in support of that, but there was some hesitation, so we still need to have some conversations about that, what exactly you're hoping for here. I would just say that because we own this property, this is our opportunity to do some of that deeper affordability. I think there was some hesitation, just the complications, the capital stack to put together affordable housing is complicated. And so do we want to do that? And so that's something you'll have to think about. In terms of, I think, the phasing, people felt more comfortable with this plan, that they were better able to phase. The other plan really was banking on getting the properties, the adjacent properties. I think that this allows us to move forward if we need to without the other two, and to still have something could happen on those properties in the future. So those were some of the things that were.
Thank you.
And I think the design team also, because one has been identified in this team and has a clear record, that was also positive.
Could you explain a little bit more about the, whether it's confusion or disagreement or complication around the deeper affordability for this project that you were just talking about at the study session? Because I remember feeling also like I just unclear or confused around it myself. And so I guess I didn't, do they go out and choose, do they go out and choose a bunch of different applications for different types of affordability? I guess, how does it work? I don't really understand more in detail.
What I think, and Lori is here and could maybe, or she was here. No, she's not anymore. Lori is no longer here. Lori Burke-Claire has the experience for that. I mean, I think what she was saying and has said to us is that, if you want deeper affordability, she can work on that. There's a variety of ways to go about that. We could apply for tax credits. That's that year-long process that you could get to the end of and find that you just missed the funding. And then you go back another, it's long, so we could talk about that. There are options for getting project-based Section 8 vouchers that you could do just a few units that way. She has a lot of experience in terms of accessibility. So there's a variety of ways the project could go depending on it. But I mean, there were a few voices, which I think they were maybe the minority voice, saying, nope, we should just do 20% at 50 and that's all we want. We've been hearing, we think, from you that you want some deeper affordability. So this, in our mind, is our best option for doing that. But, I didn't get a sense that people were necessarily comfortable with 100% affordable building. Tax credits can now do a variety of income levels. And so while it's income restricted, it's not necessarily affordable only for folks with very low incomes. Mm-hmm. You could go up to 70% of the AMI, for example, and that's really not a low-income renter by any means, but that would be what it would be capped at in terms of rents and who could live there. So it's sort of technical differences, but I think it does allow for that mix of incomes, which we also hear from you that you like. So
I think I would just add that, if you were to think about charting affordability, as the affordability requirements go down, more affordable, the complexity and the uncertainty of the applications go up. And so I think that's maybe what I heard a little bit of concern about at the work session was we're hearing a whole lot of options on affordability. And again, with those options, you start taking away some of the certainty. And the purpose of this preliminary development agreement, as opposed to when we come back to you in a few months with a full development agreement, this preliminary development agreement is really us telling the developer, we're not going to sell this land to anybody else while we all figure this out. And so they're going to have opportunities leading up to the full development agreement to come back to in that agreement to say exactly what the affordability that they're proposing looks like and how they intend to fund it. So you'll get at least one more shot at discussing that.
So
go ahead.
Just a follow-up question. So do they then apply for several different types of affordability and see kind of if they get any or which ones they do get? Is that kind of how it happens?
I think what we'll do is go back now and talk with them about what, I hear a lot of strong consensus support for accessible housing, affordable accessible housing, and perhaps that's the path. And so then we go back and we meet and we sit with Lori and say, what's our best path for that? Where can we be most successful? I think I'm hearing that you don't necessarily want 100% affordability. You'd like a mix. And so then what's our best path for that? So we need to start having those conversations about, she is saying she can provide a variety depending on what we want. Yeah. So, if you have ideas and thoughts exactly what you would like her to pursue.
Well, and to the extent we can identify a floor and a ceiling, I think the floor is probably 20% at 50% of the AMI. And is the ceiling 100% affordable? Is it 75% affordable? So any feedback you could give us on that would help to identify the range of affordability, and then helps them to better identify the tools to achieve that range.
I mean, I think the other piece that, we haven't gotten to the specifics of, but the Met Council has said that our fair share of that 30% AMI housing is 66 units. And it's going to be hard to get at that if just a few units here and there, So this is an opportunity to do more of those units. If you're committed to that, that 66 number is, based on sort of a regional scale. We promise to do our best, but as a community, how much do we want to, is that really the number we want and we really want to work to achieve? Or, I'd like you to think a little bit about that, because this would be a great opportunity to do that with someone who knows how to do that kind of housing.
This past week, in anticipation of this meeting, I don't know about other people, but I received a number of emails from residents on the topic of affordable housing. And one of the things that seemed to be stated over and over is if we're going to be investing public money, they wanted investing to help with the affordability and the deep affordability rather than like luxury apartments or things like that. That the accessibility and the affordability is where they would like to see our funds targeted. So I think this is an opportunity to listen to those voices.
So the shorter answer is we'll start having more conversations, and maybe we come up with a couple of ideas, formulas, and
So you don't need us to have the conversation right now?
I don't,
Okay.
unless you have some feedback for us now, but if it's something you want to think about and
Well, I would just agree
us
with
know.
Chair Supple on the opportunity that this is for the deeper affordability, and that it is something that we do control, and the fact that that hitting those deeper affordability targets are going to be difficult. I think those are all good points. And then when you look at kind of where our affordable housing is, it is also kind of taking into consideration kind of more equal distribution, I think, across the city.
Right, when you look at, and somebody had pointed this out, that the other two developments going on in the Penn corridor, they aren't affordable at all. So you could think of it that way, is,
Well,
we're still providing a mix of housing along the Penn corridor.
I do think it should be a mix within the building as well.
As
I
well.
want to push for the deeper affordability and the accessibility, but there should be a mixture.
And that was my comment. I think we talked about that today in the study session, that there would be a diversity of types of units or affordability within a building.
And I would say that there is already a mix in that neighborhood, so I would be all for 100% of that building.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. So we'll be having more conversations and let you know where we're at.
Would somebody like to make the motion then?
So moved.
I'll second.
Oh,
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve a resolution granting approval to a preliminary development agreement and right of entry agreement with Penn Investments LLC for the redevelopment of 6501 Penn Avenue South. And is it 6504 Oliver Avenue South? All right.
I'm sorry, 6,500 Oliver.
6,500.
Did we get the wrong
one
address?
place says
Oh,
6504
shoot,
and one
yeah.
says
So they own
6500.
they own 6504.
Okay, so 6500 Oliver Avenue South. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved that resolution. Moving on to item 6, which is consideration to authorize the HRA Executive Director to approve expenditures and approve and execute professional service agreements and contracts in amounts up to $50,000. Mr. Stark.
In the day-to-day business of administering the HRA, there are frequently agreements, contracts, and to be approved and/or invoices to be paid for the professional services and other contractual arrangements. To the best of staff's knowledge, there is no formal guidelines to differentiate which contracts or invoices staff has the authority to approve versus those requiring formal HRA pre-authorization. Currently, therefore, staff uses its discretion on which of these contracts or invoices should be pre-approved by the board of the HRA. The city of Richfield has a policy stating that the city manager has authority to approve contracts or purchases of up to $175,000, and that any such expense over that must be taken to the city council. Staff is suggesting a similar, albeit scaled back, policy to be adopted by the HRA, in which the executive director would have the authority to approve expenditures, contracts, or agreements of up to $50,000 without pre-approval of the HRA board. All expenses of the HRA are reported to the board after expenditure in the form of the approval of claims by the HRA at each of its regular meetings. In other words, if we spent some money, you would know about it. So that concludes my staff report.
I'll move approval.
Second.
It's been moved to approve a resolution authorizing the HRA Executive Director to approve expenditures and approve and execute professional service agreements or contracts in an amount up to $50,000. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the recommended action. Next, we have HRA discussion items. Are there any items you wish to bring up?
I would just like to say I really appreciated the work session that we had previous to this, which was a joint work session with the City Council and the HRA to talk about our affordable housing goals as a community. And there was a lot of community members there who provided great input via email to us. And the staff did a great job of putting data around our affordable housing work together. And I just think it shows we have a lot of work to do, and it's a very complex issue that is affecting every single community. But I just appreciate that we continue to revisit and try to do better every single time, because I think that's what it's going to take to really do everything we can to ensure that we are supporting affordable housing in Richfield. So thank you to everybody, the community members, the staff who put a lot of time into preparation, the facilitator, and everyone who attended.
Thank you. And to add to that, I'm looking forward to, when we follow up and reconvene to look at action steps. Any other discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the Executive Director's report.
I did not have a report prepared, but I will revisit item number 4 briefly, where we talked about the preliminary development agreement with North Bay for the development of the Henley II. After that item, I caught up with the developer. I misstated. I was asked if they owned the 22-unit building. They do not have it. They have not closed on the purchase of it. They have it under purchase agreement, though, under binding purchase agreement. And they also said that since I last spoke to them, they've done additional evaluation of the building. They feel very certain that they will be able to rehabilitate the building.
They
So,
will?
They will.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Anything else?
No.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll move on to claims.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we have finished our business, and we will convene the EDA in about 2 minutes. Thank you. HRE is adjourned. So there's stuff for us to sign.
Current officers. Vice President
Elliot?
Elliott and not one of us.
No. And there's a treasurer. Sue is the treasurer. Why we have,
I'm a treasurer.
that's,
I've never
You
seen
are.
a checkbook.
so when we run out of money, we should come looking for you.
Good luck with that.
Current secretary?
Kate Aitchison, but we're recommending Oh, we don't really recommend in the staff report. I would recommend that if you wanted a non-commissioner, Ms. Latanya Dubois would be a good alternative. Not only is Ms. Dubois a staff member of the EDA, she's a Richfield resident.
All right, at this point, we're going to call to order the January 21st Economic Development Authority meeting for the city of Richfield. It is 7:41 p.m. Okay, our first order of business is consideration of the election of officers for the Richfield Economic Development Authority of 2020.
I would move a slate of officers as follows. President, Commissioner Supple. Vice President, Commissioner Elliott. Treasurer, Commissioner Sue Sandal. And Secretary, Latanya Dubois.
I'll let the
Richfield resident
assistant treasurer.
and staff member.
Assistant treasurer.
Oh, and Assistant Treasurer, Chris Regis.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All in favor of the slate that Commissioner Vries-Daniels just stated, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've elected those officers. Our next item is approval of the minutes of the EDA meeting of November 18th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the agenda. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the EDA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, all of the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved, and no further EDA action would be necessary. However, any EDA commissioner may request the removal of an item. Tonight we have 4 items on the consent calendar. Item A, consider the adoption of a resolution amending the bylaws of the Richfield EDA to revise the order of business, including the addition of an open forum. And I will just stop there and note, I should have done this for the HRA. We did hand out updated resolutions. There was some extraneous language held over from last year about the order of voting that was not intended to be included here. Item B, consideration of resolutions designating official depositories for the Economic Development Authority for 2020, including the approval of collateral. Item C, an amendment to the guidelines for the Kids at Home program to remove any requirement of citizenship. And finally, the designation of Community Development Director John Stark as the Executive Director of the Richfield Economic Development Association for 2020. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
I'll move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the calendar. Is there any discussion?
Can I ask a question? On
Go
the
ahead.
Kids at Home program, thank you for bringing this up. Currently housed in unsubsidized rental housing in Richfield, no shared housing. What does that mean by no shared housing? It's like the first line for under criteria.
Is that
I
like
think
when you,
I think it means you can't be roommates.
Like-
You have to have your own unit. You can't like be living in someone's basement without like your own lease and
And the idea that because you wouldn't be paying rent.
right, because
without
of
a
the
lease.
it has to be an official situation for our program to be applicable. Yep.
Not for this, but in future, it might be good to clarify what we mean by that within the guidelines, so that that isn't confusing, I might see shared housing as like, I live in an apartment building.
That's a
So
good
forth.
suggestion.
Sure, I will.
Yep.
See, I
Sorry,
had,
I'm still trying to find.
I thought
where
it
that
meant
was.
like having like 3 families in one apartment.
Well, it would mean that as well, unless all 3 families had leases. And that's,
Okay.
and really the point is,
Thank
you have to have a formalized rent agreement, because a lot of what this is based on is your rental costs.
Yeah.
And without a formalized agreement, it's
I just don't
difficult.
want it to deter someone from
Yep.
applying.
No, that's a
so.
really good suggestion. We'll look at rewording that to make it more
Thank you.
clear.
And again, thank you, Executive Director Stark, for your work for the EDA.
Yep, thank you.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the consent agenda. And again, is there anyone who wishes to speak at an open forum? Anyone wishing to speak for open forum? All right, then we'll move on to item 4, which is to authorize the EDA Executive Director to approve expenditures and approve and execute, professional service agreements or contracts in amounts up to $15,000.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or comments? Did you want to say anything, Director Stark? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've authorized the expenditures. The next item is to consider the creation of an energy-efficient business grant.
Thank you, Chair
So,
Supple.
Go ahead.
The Richfield EDA, has been budgeting funds for business assistance programming since its inception in 2018. Based on staff's recommendation, however, these funds have been accumulating instead of being expended in order to create an adequate source of funding for programs. At the October 21st, 2019 EDA work session, staff proposed a number of programs recommended for implementation in 2020. Among these was an energy-efficient business grant program. This grant would provide an incentive for Richfield businesses to participate in several programs administered by the Center for Energy and Environment, otherwise known as CEE, intended to help businesses save both money and natural resources by making energy-efficient upgrades. The CEE program works with and receives funding from metro area utility companies as well. Specifically, the CEE program focuses on lighting efficiency, refrigeration, and rooftop units, and we've attached some handouts of similar programs that they do in other communities. Staff is proposing that the EDA provide a grant to cover 20% of the costs of installation of qualified energy efficiency upgrades for Richfield businesses in a maximum amount of up to $2,500 per business. In the first year, staff is contemplating a budget of $20,000 for the grants, plus $1,000 for marketing the program. This would allow at least 8 Richfield businesses to participate. The details of how CEE would administer this program are outlined in the attached memorandum of understanding. I would add, though, that they would be administering this at no cost to the HRA as part of their work with utility companies and with communities. So with that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
Is it going to cost the EDA any money?
No, did I say HRA? I'm sorry. I'm really excited about this program. We're looking for ways to help Richfield businesses with their ongoing expenses and getting a foothold in the market, and then this is allowing them to lower their carbon footprint, lower their impact on the environment, and so it's just such a win-win, and we're not having to pay for it.
Do you already have businesses that are looking towards this, or do you think would be interested in it?
No, we have not started marketing it yet.
Thank you.
One thing I noticed, we've been setting aside funds, and this just uses up a piece of it, which leaves availability for other programs as well. So I think it's a good start.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions or discussion? Otherwise, we need someone to make the motion.
I will move that we approve a memorandum of understanding with the Center for Energy and Environment for the use of $21,000 of EDA authority funds for the implementation of an energy-efficient business grant.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I just would comment that this is kind of in line with what we talked about in the earlier discussion, work study session about supporting Richfield businesses.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the recommendation. Item 6 is consideration of the creation of a small business revolving loan fund program for Richfield businesses.
Thank you, Chair Supple. As I'd mentioned, the EDA held a work session on October 21st of last year to talk about business assistance programming. Among the items that the EDA discussed was the creation of a small business revolving loan fund for Richfield businesses. Lee Hall, the Chief Operating Officer of the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers, or MCCD, attended that work session and discussed their ability to help a community establish and administer a revolving loan program for local businesses. The EDA already works with MCCD as a participant in its Open to Business program. Based on the outcome of the work session and ongoing discussions with MCCD, staff is proposing that the EDA establish a small business revolving loan fund. As proposed, MCCD would underwrite and administer loans for businesses located in Richfield. They recommend that the underwriting criteria would be a little more lenient than typical loans that businesses would get from a large lending institution, but that the interest rate should be marginally higher to compensate for the increased lending risk. Staff is proposing that the EDA provide a maximum contribution, $15,000 per loan to the loan, and MCCD would match or exceed the EDA's participation in the loan. Staff's recommendation is that no more than 25% of any loan issued under this program could be used for operating costs, and the remainder would have to be used for capital or equipment costs. For 2020, staff would consider this a pilot program and is recommending that $60,000 be deposited with MCCD in accordance with the attached contract for dispersal to loan recipients. An additional $1,250 be budgeted for marketing the program. There are no costs associated with their administration and underwriting of the loans, as they charge an industry standard loan origination fee to the borrower to cover their costs. MCCD states that a typical loan has a term of 5 years and that the EDA would earn back approximately $3,900 per year on a 5-year loan in an amount of $15,000. These funds would be reused or revolved for future loans. I would note that we do have a contract with MCCD attached. There are some missing exhibits. There was discussions of exhibits B, C, and D. We have not received those yet from MCCD, and so that's something that we could either bring back to you, or you could give us the authorization to review with the EDA legal counsel and administratively approve if you're okay with the additions.
All right, is there any discussion? Go ahead.
Couple of things. One, I am happy to see the layout of this. I'm really excited about this program. I'm really happy about the no more than 25% of the loan is issued for operating costs, and that it really is not a bridge loan, then it is to enhance someone's business and help them grow. So I think that's fantastic. We're calling that out. One thing that I do have a concern with, though, is the higher interest rate. I'm just thinking about from an equity lens, right? Are we penalizing someone because we perceive them to be more risk, and how can we be different than a big bank?
Yeah, and we had that. I had that discussion with MCCD as well. They said that's consistent with the way that they operate these loans in all of the other communities. And the thinking is, really, it's to dissuade people that can get bank financing from participating, particularly larger businesses. So if Best Buy were to come and say, okay, we're going to apply and we'd like our $15,000, well, it'd be more financially advantageous for them to just go to a lending institution. I would tell you that when we say it's a marginally higher rate, it's, I can't remember if it was 1/4 of 1%. It was a very small difference.
Yeah.
But the idea was, again, to make sure it's people that, make sure it's businesses that couldn't resort to traditional lending.
I appreciate that. I'm wondering if there's a different way to go about that same goal. And you mentioned like Best Buy. Is there any then stipulations on what equates a small business, right? Like we want to make sure that this is small businesses going after this. Is there any other policies as part of this to that we could achieve the same goal but not penalize them with an interest rate?
Yep. And so I asked all these same
Yeah.
questions of MCCD, and they didn't have recommendations other than this. And again, I think part of it is they would like to standardize a little bit of the services that they provide to communities to help keep their administration more streamlined. And so they're not having to think, okay, Brooklyn Center does it this way, Richfield does it a little bit different at this way, Brooklyn Park does it a little bit differently. So they're trying to standardize a little bit of this as well.
Yeah.
So, if it's something as a board you're hesitant to approve tonight, I could go back to them and keep working on it.
I think from my standpoint is since it is a pilot program, but keeping that lens of evaluating, are we turning people away or penalizing them, and really keeping track of that as we maybe expand it in the future.
Yeah, and their reporting, and I think you'll be getting the Open to Business report next month, the annual report for 2018 as a part of the year-end review, does include information on women and minority-owned businesses. So we're able to track the equity lens.
Okay.
And I suspect that the loan program would have that same tracking.
Thank you.
Are there other comments or questions?
I would like to move that we support the resolution to approve the $61,250 EDA authority funds to implement the Small Business Revolving Loan Fund Program and approve the contract with the Metropolitan Consortium Community Developers, change the page, for the administration of a small business revolving loan program for Richfield businesses, and request that staff just report back to us at the next meeting what the missing exhibits were, and to authorize staff to go forward unless there's some surprise.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. By way of discussion, again, I think this is a good use of those funds that we set aside, and there still will be funds available if we want to look at like relocation grants or loans and things like that. So I think this is prudent use of funds. All right, any other comments or discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we've approved that. Next, we have EDA discussion items. I did want to say I had asked Executive Director Stark about all the different things we had talked about during the work session, and there is further study coming forward on the relocation loans, so we haven't forgotten about those. Any other discussion items? All right, Executive Director's report.
I have nothing to report. I will be absent. I'm forewarning you at next month's HRA and EDA meeting.
All right. And thank you. And next, claims.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, we've approved claims. Seeing no further business, we stand adjourned.